Relatively, relatively to the principles of modern science, werewolves cannot be, but I know of no such principle that is other than tautology or approximation. It is myth stuff. Then, if relatively to a group of phantoms werewolves cannot be, there are at least negative grounds for thinking that they are quite likely. Relatively to the principles, or lack of principles, of ultra modern science, there isn't anything that can't be, or even though also it is not clear how anything can be. So, my acceptance, or pseudo conclusion, is that werewolves are quite likely, unlikely. Once upon a time, when minds were dosed with the pill theory of matter, werewolves were said to be physically impossible. Very little globes were said to be the ultimates of matter and were supposed to be understandable, and people thought they knew what matter is. But the pills have rolled away. Now we are told that the ultimates are waves. It is impossible to think of a wave. One has to think of something that is waving. Excuse me. If anyone or anybody can think of crime, virtue, or color independent of somebody who is criminal, virtuous, or colored, that thinker or whatever may say that he knows what he is talking about and denying the existence of anything upon physical grounds. To say that the ultimate waves are electrical comes no closer to saying something. If there is no definition of electricity better than that of saying that it is a mode of motion, we're not enlighteningly told that the ultimate waves are moving motions. My suspicion is that we've got everything reversed, or that all things that have the sanction of scientists or that are in agreement with their myths are ghosts. And that things called ghosts are because they are not in agreement with the spooks of science, the more nearly real things. I now suspect that the spiritualists are reversedly right that there is a ghost world, but that it is our existence that when spirits die, they become human beings. Now have a theory that once upon a time we were real and alive, but departed into this state that we call existence that we have carried over with us from the real existence from which we died. The ideas of truth and the axioms and principles and generalizations, ideas that really meant something when we were really alive. But that, of course, now in our phantom existence, which is demonstrable by an X ray photograph of any of us, can have only phantom meaning. So, then our never ending but always frustrated search for our lost reality. We come upon chimera and mystification, but persistently have beliefs as retentions from an experience in which there were things to believe in. I'd not say that all of us are directly ghosts. Most of us may be the descendants of the departed from a real existence who, in our spook world, pseudo propagated once upon a time, but in our own times, there were two alleged marvels that were sources of uncommon contempt or amusement to scientists. They were the transformation of elements into other elements and the transformation of human animals into other animals. The history of science is a record of the transformations of contempts and amusements. I think that the idea of werewolves is most silly, degraded, and superstitious. Therefore, I incline towards it respectively. It is so laughable that I am serious about this. Marauding animals have often unaccountably appeared in or near human communities in Europe and in the United States. The explanation of an escape from a menagerie has many times been unsatisfactory or has had nothing to base upon. I have collected notes upon these occurrences as teleportations, but also there may be lycanthropy. Nobody has ever been finally reasonable, and it is impossible for me to be absolutely unreasonable. I can tell no yarn that is wholly a yarn if it be my whim or inspiration to come out for the existence of werewolves. What is there that absolutely sets apart the story of a man who turned into an ape or a hyena from the story of a caterpillar that became a butterfly, or rascals who almost starved to death and then learned to take on the looks of philanthropists? There are shabby young doctors and clergymen who turn so sleek after learning the lingo of altruists that they have and the appearance, well, that they have the appearance of very different animals, or the series of portraits of Napoleon Bonaparte and so much of his mind upon classical models, and the transformation of a haggard young man into much resemblance to the Roman Emperor Augustus. It is a matter of common belief that men have come from animals called lower, not necessarily from apes, though the ape theory seems to fit best and is the most popular. Then why not that occasionally a human slow. What's that word? Then why not that occasionally a human sloughs backward? Data of reversions, not of individuals, but of species, are common in biology. I have come upon many allusions to the leopard men and the hyena men of African tribes, but the most definite story that I know of is an article by Richard Baggett in the Cornhill magazine, October 1918, upon the alleged powers of natives of northern Nigeria to take on the forms of lower animals. An experience attributed to Captain Shot, DSO, is told of. It is said that raiding hyenas had been wounded by gun traps, and in each case had been traced to a point where the hyena tracks had ceased and had been succeeded by human footprints leading to a native town. A particular of the traditional werewolf story is that when a werewolf is injured, the injury appears upon a corresponding part of the human being of its origin. Baggett told of Captain Shot's experience, alleged experience, whatever, with an enormous brute that had been shot and had made off, leaving tracks that were followed. The hunters came to a spot where they found the jaw of the animal lying in a pool of blood. The tracks went on towards a native town. The next day, a native died. His jaw had been shot away. There have been many appearances of animals that were unexplained, anyway, until I appeared upon the horizon of this field of data. Until I appeared upon the horizon of this field of data. It seems to me that my expression upon teleportations are somewhat satisfactory in most of the cases. That is, that there is a force distributive of forms of life and other phenomena that could switch an animal, say from a jungle in Madagascar to a backyard somewhere in Nebraska. But theories of mine are not so godlike as to deny any right of being for all other theories. I'd not be dogmatic and say positively that once upon a time a lemur was magically transported from Africa to Nebraska. Possibly somebody in Lincoln, Nebraska had been transformed into a lemur or was a were-lemur. Whatever the explanation may be, the story was told in the New York Sun, November 12, 1931. Dr. E.R. Mathers of Lincoln, Nebraska had seen a strange small animal in his yard acting queerly. The next day, he found the creature dead. The body was taken to Dr. I.H. Blake of the University of Nebraska, who identified it as that of an African lemur of the Galga group. A lemur is a monkey-like animal with a long snout, size about that of a monkey. I wrote to Dr. Mathers about this, and considerably to my surprise, because mostly my crank letters are very properly ignored, received an answer dated November 21st, 1931. Dr. Mathers verified the story. The lemur stuffed and mounted is now on exhibition in the Museum of the State University at Lincoln. Where it had come from had not been learned. There was no story of an escape anywhere that could match this appearance in a backyard. Accounts have been spearheaded with illustrations in the Lincoln State Journal, October 23rd, and in the Sunday State Journal, October 25th. But not even in some other backyard had this animal been seen, according to absence of statements. I neglected to ask whether at the time of the appearance of the lemur, the disappearance of any resident of Lincoln was reported. Suppose at a meeting of the National Academy of Sciences I should read a paper upon the transformation of a man into a hyena. There would be only one way of doing that. I recommend it to unrecognized geniuses who can't otherwise get a hearing. It would have been a holdup. It would have to be a holdup. But without having to pull a gun, at the meeting of the NAS at New Haven, Connecticut, November 18, 1931, Dr. Richard C. Tolman suggested that energy may be transforming into matter. If one can't think of a man transforming into a hyena, let one try to think of the motions of a thing turning into a thing. My expression is that in our existence of the hyphen or of intermediateness between so called opposites, there is no energy and there is no matter, but that there is a matter energy manifesting in different degrees of emphasis one way or the other. That it is not thinkable that energy could turn into matter, but that it is thinkable that energy matter could, by a difference of emphasis, turn into matter energy, or that there is no man who is without the hyena element, the hyena, no, it's hyena element in his composition, and that there is no hyena that is not at least rudimentarily human, or that at least it may be reasoned that by no absolute transformation, but by a shift of emphasis, a man hyena might turn into a hyena man. The year 1931, and there were everywhere, wait, and there were everywhere, but most notably in the USA, such shifts or reversions from the state that is called civilization, that there was talk of repealing laws against carrying weapons and of the arming of citizens to protect themselves, as if such cities as New York and Chicago were frontier towns. Out of policemen. In all, hold on, let me do it one more time. Damn it. Yeah, that whole sentence. Where was it? Damn it. The year 1931. And there were everywhere, but most notably in the USA, such shifts or reversions from the state that is called civilization, that there was talk of repealing laws against carrying weapons and of the arming of citizens to protect themselves, as if such cities as New York and Chicago were frontier towns. Out of policemen in all except physical appearance had come wolves that had preyed upon nocturnal women. There were chases of savages through the streets of New York City. Jackals on juries picked up bits from kills by bigger beasts and snarled their jackal verdicts. New York Times, June 30th, 1931. Police at Manola hunt ape-like animal. Hairy creature about 4 feet tall. Out of judges had come swine. Count Judge W. Bernard Voss found guilty of using the males to defraud and sentenced to 6 years in Atlanta Penitentiary. Federal Judge Grover M. Moskowitz was censured by the House of Representatives. The magistrates who, facing charges of corruption, resigned were Mancuso, Ewald, McQuaid, Goodman, Simpson. Vital was removed, or Vital. Crater disappeared. Rosenbluth went away for his health's sake. All right.